Alright, I've checked out a bunch of stuff on YouTube, and I'm finally gonna cave in and get started with WarThunder. Let's get this badass jet off the carrier and get into some action. Aw, yeah. Wait, what? That can't be right. Where's my cool jet? Huh. Let's take a look at getting started with WarThunder AirBattles in the middle of 2021. Now, after you log in and pick air battles for the first time, it's going to ask you to pick a country for your first battle. It doesn't really matter what you pick, but I just click the USA here. And then after you do that, it's going to show you this little daily bonus. Every day you log in, you get a little consumable. It's like a generic little loot box thing. And it gives you a consumable bonus you can pop once. Then you're going to want to set up your controls. I skipped it, but you should do that. Then it's going to tell you about these tutorials. Do every tutorial early on, especially the ones that have the little golden eagles as the reward. You'll thank me later, just do the tutorials. And then from here, we just click to battle at the top of the screen. Now, after you've been in the queue for a moment, it's going to pop you into a game with some AI bots. Basically, this is just going to be a quick entry fight against some computer opponents. We're going to want to set our fuel to minimum load if it's not already. We'll talk about that later. You can change your air show smoke if you care, and play with these other options, but they don't really matter for now. So let's just pick our P-26 pea shooter and hit to battle. That will spawn us into the game, flying our little P-26. Now you're going to notice this isn't exactly the big fancy jet fighter, or even like some of the cool World War II planes that you see featured on YouTube. When you start off in WarThunder, you start off with these reserve tier aircraft. That's what these intro planes are called. Really early 1930s pre-war or interwar period aircraft from the span of time in between World War I and World War II. These are really basic planes, and it's the same with the ground battles. You get some really entry-level tanks. They're nothing fancy, but you got to start off somewhere. So I'm not going to show this entire fight. This went on for quite a while. I ended up killing the vast majority of these bots. I think I got like a dozen kills. But when you're in this fight, take the opportunity to play around with the controls, play around with your camera settings. These bots don't really fight back very hard. The time isn't going to run out very quickly. So you have the opportunity to just sort of mess around here and learn the controls, figure out what you're doing. You're going to notice that, you've got that little aiming pip, that little circle in front of the enemy aircraft that helps you figure out where exactly you're supposed to be shooting. So you can get a little bit of a feel for aerial gunnery. Now, one thing that needs to be said right up front, you're going to notice that even at these lower tiers, or especially these lower tiers, you need a lot of time on target in order to actually shoot things down. This little plane that we're flying, this P-26 pea shooter, is only armed with like a couple of 30 caliber machine guns. It has like nothing for armaments. It's very aptly named the pea shooter. So even just shooting down other, lightly armored aircraft from the 1930s, we got to pump them full of quite a few shots before they'll actually go down. You might get lucky and hit a couple of pilots, and you'll get the shoot down credit for taking out the enemy pilot. But generally speaking, especially like at longer range, like I'm shooting here, you're going to need some time on target to pump these guys for a little bit before they actually go down. That's normal. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just that the reserve aircraft you start with are very lightly armed. You do eventually get planes that can, score hits a lot better and shoot down planes a lot quicker. And you don't even have to wait too long to get those better planes. But, don't get turned off by your first experience in this fight against the bots. Just take the opportunity to learn the controls, and we'll talk about actually winning in a few minutes. Now, at the end of the fight, you're going to get some post-battle statistics. This is going to show you like the stats that you got and how many planes you shot down and all that. At the end of this first tutorial fight, you're also going to get a pop-up telling you that you won a free plane. That doesn't happen very often, so take note of that. And by the way, this is why it matters what country you choose at the beginning. This is the only real difference it makes, is the free plane you get. So we're going to stick that free plane into our crew slot, and we'll have fun with that. And this screen here, this just shows you all the stuff I shot down, how many points we got. The silver lions are the main like money in the game that you use to like buy upgrades for your planes and stuff. So then we'll cancel out of all this and get back to our main hangar view. The very first thing we can take a look at is this new plane that we got. You're going to notice the background is in gold, whereas these other two planes, the background is in that gray color. What that means is that Galler's F3F2 is a premium aircraft. If we click our research tree, this will show us all of the aircraft in the game. And you're going to notice over on the left-hand side are these regular researchable vehicles. Right now we have the TBD-1 selected. It's a dive bomber. That's a great choice for a first plane to unlock. And over on the right hand are premium vehicles. And these all have the gold-colored backgrounds. Now, well, almost all of them. These are some unique situations. Some of these aircraft that don't have the gold-colored backgrounds, you can unlock them through like annual events. And the ones with the green backgrounds, you can only research them if you're in a squadron with other players. But generally speaking, these aircraft with the gold-colored backgrounds are all premium planes. And really what that means is that they start off with what's called a talisman. Now to get into this screen, we right-click on a plane and do modifications. The talisman is an upgrade that basically doubles the research points when you're controlling that particular plane. That might sound kind of but, you know, because you only have it on one plane out of your three. But in reality, especially when you get into like the jet tiers and the higher end of like the World War II stuff, that ends up being a significant boost because the game gets pretty grindy, once you get pretty deep into the tech tree. Most of the other premium aircraft come with all of these upgrades already purchased. The free one you get does not, and some of the other like low-tier premium stuff does not. But so let's take a look at this. On this screen, it's going to show us our default armament, our secondary weapon load, which right now we don't have one. If we click expand, this is going to show us all the weapon loads we can get. We can get a couple of 100-pound bombs. It's not unlocked yet, which is why it's all red. So we're just going to close out of that. And we can see over here, the Mark 41, this is where we would research. We'll activate that as our focus of research in order to open up those bombs. We can also use the Golden Eagle premium currency to do a purchase on that and unlock them immediately, but we're not going to bother. I strongly recommend against using Golden Eagles to do any upgrades on the planes early in the game. You're going to find that the early game aircraft, you're going to be able to unlock these upgrades relatively quickly compared to stuff later in the game. Just take my word for it for right now. Save the Golden Eagles. You'll thank me later. Now, once we upgrade our machine guns, we would also be able to choose the different ammo types. Now, this makes a difference in that if we hover over an ammo type, you're going to see it shows us what's on the belt, and it shows us down the bottom the armor penetration values. Like, for example, our default ammo belt, it's going to penetrate 26 millimeters of armor at 0 degree deflection at 10 meters. So point blank range, we're going to pump through 26 millimeters of armor. But if we go down into like the stealth rounds, see, well, with this plane, they're not really too different, but the stats can be quite a bit different, especially with some of the other aircraft that have higher caliber cannon shells. Generally speaking, you're going to find that the tracers often have less armor piercing capability. However, you have a higher chance with like the tracers or the universal rounds to light your targets on fire, depending on what you're shooting at. And the stealth rounds, they're not going to see the shells flying by them. They can be a little harder to aim, but the advantage there is that they don't see the shots coming. And, the vast majority of the time, they're not going to know what direction you're shooting at them from. In any case, so here are the rest of all the upgrades we can research on Galer's F3, F2 here. We can research like engine injection, radiator, these are all just things that increase the performance of the aircraft. So we get a little bit of an RPG element onto it. If we go on to the reserve aircraft and go into modifications, we're going to notice that similar to Galer's F3, F2, we don't really start with a lot unlocked. We've got to grind this stuff out by playing matches. Now, speaking of playing matches, there's a couple of things to take a look at. Up here at the top, underneath the To Battle button, is our game mode selector. There's Air Arcade, Air Realistic, and then there's Ground and Naval. Once you go through the tutorials for Ground and Naval and do that like intro fight against the bots, you'll be able to choose like Realistic and Arcade. But for right now, we're just going to talk about air battles. We'll talk about like combined battles in a little while. But the primary difference to know about is that in air realistic battles, you don't have as much help in aiming your weapons as you do in arcade battles. The physics in realistic battles are more realistic, and the way that the match is structured is quite a bit different. In air realistic battles, you choose one plane and start the fight in only that plane, and you start off on an airfield. In air arcade battles, you can use your entire roster of aircraft, meaning all of these different crew slots that we have unlocked that are full and have a plane in. We can use all of these when we're playing in arcade battles, but not in realistic battles. There's some caveats with that with ground realistic battles we'll talk about another time. Simulator battles are a step above realistic battles. I don't recommend playing with that until you've got a little bit more experience. Generally speaking, simulator battles are going to be a lot longer. You're going to be stuck inside your aircraft. Your camera views are a little bit limited. They tend to be a step above in the realism, and frankly, it's a lot harder. So until you get the feel for the game, I would hold off on that. So air arcade battles at the lower tiers, and by lower tiers, we're talking about like these ranks. At the lower tiered matches, arcade battles generally fill up a lot quicker than realistic battles. And at the higher tiers, once you get into jets, realistic battles tend to fill up a lot quicker than arcade battles. Meaning that, like at these lower tiers, if we go in arcade battles and we hit To Battle, we'll only be in the queue for a minute or two before we get into a fight. But if we were in a lineup full of jets, like on my main account, queuing for arcade battles, we might be in the queue for 15 or 20 minutes before there are enough people signed up in arcade battles for us to get into a match. Whereas with realistic battles, at the higher jet tiers, we'll get into a match generally in under a minute. I'm not 100% sure why that's the case, but in the current state of the game, that's the thing. I would recommend leaving it on arcade battles until you get the hang of it. Now, the other advantage with realistic battles, and I think, this probably contributes to why more people play jets in realistic battles, but I can't be 100% sure. I don't think it's the whole story. But the other main difference is that in realistic battles, you earn more points. So in exchange for having a slightly higher difficulty and only being able to take out one of your planes, you gain more research points at the end of the match than you do with arcade battles. But with arcade battles, you get to fly all of your aircraft. So if you're good, you can potentially rank up a higher ceiling, a higher maximum number of points. Now, let's take a look for a second at the stat card by hovering the mouse over this P-26 pea shooter. Now, looking here at the stats of the plane, it's going to show us rank 1, battle rating 1.0. It's going to show us our armaments. There are some important things to look at. The 1 second burst mass is 0.17 kilograms per second. I'm sorry, 0.71 kilograms per second. This is literally just how much metal we're throwing in the air when we hold down the trigger to shoot. That is a direct reflection, for the most part, of the amount of damage that you're going to be doing to things that you're shooting at and hit. When you see some aircraft that have a higher value there, generally it's going to be easier to shoot things down with them. For example, if we just go down to like this P-38, you're going to see a 1-second burst mass of 3.58 kilograms per second because it's got more bigger guns. And it's going to be a lot easier to shoot things down hitting them with the P-38 than it is with the P-26A that we're looking at here. You can also check out some of the stats about like the maximum speed and the rate of climb and all that good stuff, and also the max repair cost. You're going to notice that these early aircraft are free to repair, whereas like this premium plane and others are not. It has that 270 Silver Lions. That means that if you get shot down, you're going to have to pay that in order to repair the plane and put it back in action. It's also going to show you some stats down at the bottom about the vehicle research efficiency. Now, this is a contributing factor that's important to understand because it directly affects the grind. When you're flying these lower-tiered aircraft, their max vehicle research efficiency is ranks 1 and 2. And if we go down a little bit, here we're in rank 4. The max research efficiency is ranks 3 through 5. So generally, when you're flying a plane, it produces the most research points if you are researching something ranked 1 below it up to 1 above it. So if we're flying all these low-tiered planes, let's say we have a bunch of this other stuff unlocked, but we're still flying these low-tiered planes, and we're researching like the F2H2, the research gains are going to be dramatically nerfed. They're going to be dramatically reduced because this is a rank 5 plane, and all of the stuff we're flying has a maximum efficiency of rank 1, rank 2. So the idea with that is to try and force people to actually play these higher tier planes that they unlock as they progress up the tree. And by the same token, like if you're flying a lineup full of jets and a new plane comes out and it's placed down here in rank 2, your research on it is going to be severely nerfed because you can see here like the F3H Demon, the max vehicle research efficiency is ranks 5 through 7. So if you're researching something lower down the tree, even though you need less points to unlock it, you're going to research it a lot slower. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. The next thing that it's kind of important to look at is crews. Now, each crew slot has a different crew that's assigned to it, and these can be upgraded as you fly missions, and you can upgrade different attributes with your, like for example, your pilot, your defensive gunners, once you have like a bomber, logistical services. This will affect some stuff like out of matches, like if you upgrade weapon maintenance, you see there, it'll give you a little bit of an explanation. Your guns like won't overheat as much; they'll be a little bit more accurate. That's important. But the main thing that I would strongly recommend doing, and this is important, upgrade your pilot's G tolerance, stamina, and vitality, like early on. G tolerance is definitely top priority. You want to get this up to like 3 or 4 as soon as you can. This will directly affect your ability to pull tight turns and not be blacked out in combat. So that's really important. You want that. If you find that while you're dogfighting, zigzagging in and out of combat, you're constantly getting your pilot blacked out all the time, upgrading your crew and upgrading your G tolerance will alleviate that a bit. It won't completely solve it, but it'll at least help. That becomes a significant factor once you get into the jet tiers and you can pull like sustained 7G turns that just keep going. So that's something to be aware of there. Now, let's take a look at what happens after you fight a match. Okay, so at the end of this match I just played, we're going to see some important stats. First thing we're going to notice is that in the upper right hand corner, we've researched a bit into the TBD-1 Devastator. You're going to see there's that yellow progress bar showing us what we researched. That's decent. We got a bunch of points. We're about a third of the way there after one match. That's cool. That won't happen later on. But early on, you can research new planes after just a couple of fights. You're going to notice in this particular fight, I got 11 kills. Most of the opponents in the first match were bots. That's fine. some extra post-battle stats, but the main thing to notice is that we researched a bit into the TBD-1. Now on the next screen, here it's going to show us some upgrades that we researched on our P26 pea shooters. The radiator, we can research, yeah. Then we can switch and research our offensive machine guns, and we'll finish that off. And also, you notice here on this other P26, we researched about a third of the way into the Mark 41 bombs. So we got some progress on upgrading our aircraft. There was one important difference, by the way, that I forgot to mention between arcade battles and realistic battles. Arcade battles, you have unlimited ammo. In realistic battles, you do not. In arcade battles, when you run out of ammo, whether it be bombs, machine gun ammo, or even like guided missiles, if you wait, anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes, depending on what it is, your plane will automatically rearm and you'll get some ammo back. In realistic battles, you have to fly back to your airfield and land, and your ground crew will rearm your aircraft and you can take off again with a full load. So that's something to be aware of there. Now, let's take a minute and we're going to talk about progressing down the tree. Now, the tree on each of the different nations is kind of organized into these different columns where there are like fighters in one column. Unlocking these fighters unlocks more fighters down below. Over on the right-hand side, unlocking this torpedo bomber is going to eventually unlock more bombers, more bombers, more bombers. And if we keep going down this line, unlocking our bombers, eventually we get to, like the heavier bombers later in the game. You're thinking, so what? The reason I mention that now is when you're new to the game and you're sort of like deciding what to research, take a look into your next tier and figure out what you want to fly once you get into rank 2. If, for example, you are really interested in flying the A-36, take the time now to start researching and unlocking these planes before the A-36. So the SB-2U, and again, these are folded, so we only need to unlock the first one. Then we get the SBD-3, the TBF-1, and then the A-36. If we were researching all this other stuff, that's good because it'll unlock us into rank 2, but it still won't get us the A-36. We'd still have to get, this other aircraft before it. Now, the other stat to know about on all these aircraft is this little 2-digit number in the lower right-hand corner of the tree. 2.7, 1.7, 3.7, 5.0 to 5.3. That's what's called the battle rating. That's used for matchmaking. Generally speaking, when you match and you queue up and you're fighting other people, you're only going to be fighting things within 1 BR of the plane that you're in, or the average plane, the average among your planes, if you're doing arcade battles and you have a lineup. So if we're flying the F4U-1A, the USMC version, at battle rating 3.0, we're generally only going to be fighting things that are battle rating 2.0 to 4.0. There's some minor exceptions, but generally speaking, that holds true. And if you're fighting things that are a lot lower, you'll hear people talk about getting down-tiered, or if you're fighting things that are higher, you'll hear people talking about getting up-tiered. Especially when you're flying like high-end props and you get up-tiered into jets, or if you're fighting entry-level jets and you get up-tiered into missile thunder. And, you find yourself with machine guns and cannons against, like, Sidewinders and Sparrows. That's always a fun experience. So that's the main thing to know about progressing down through the tech tree. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap this up is flying aircraft as close air support in ground RB. Now, I've switched over to France. You're going to see the French start off with these little battle Cessnas and also the D500 monoplane as their reserve aircraft. Well, if you notice down here on the bottom, we have these tabs for these presets. These are preset rosters. So I'm going to switch over to the Army roster, which is the ground battles one. And you're going to see, just like the air battles, we start off with some tanks that are reserved here. And the army tree works very similar to the aviation tree, where, you know, we've got all this different stuff that we can unlock and all that. Well, if I fill one of these slots with an aircraft, so now, with my ground battles, I have a battle Cessna, the D-373, in the same lineup with my tanks. If I play a ground match in realistic mode, I haven't done the tutorial, so it's not going to allow me to unlock it here, but if I played a ground realistic battle and I scored enough points in the match, it would allow me to play and bring out my plane from my aviation tree that I've unlocked as a close air support fighter in the ground battle I was playing with the tanks. That's true even if you unlock like strike jets or, you know, bombers and so on. So that can be a really fun thing to do. I really like to play the combined arms games. You know, my primary play mode, even though most of my videos have been aircraft at this point, is actually ground realistic battles. I love taking out, you know, like my A4 Skyhawk in the American tree, or like the Su-17 on the Russian tree, you know, jet fighters, as close air support in ground battles. So we're going to wrap it up there. I've been talking for a while, and we've been staring at these hangar screens quite a bit. I'll do a couple of follow-ups onto this video, highlighting like the lower-tiered aircraft for each of the different countries and how they're different and all that. But generally speaking, that's the really quick, you know, half-hour crash course into getting started with air battles in War Thunder in the middle of 2021. And as always, thanks for watching.